President Trump answering more questions in, say, 20 minutes than Joe Biden did in 4 years, and cogently, I might add. Yep. What do you think, Dana? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's smart for him to continue talking because this will penetrate, it will get through, and then however you get your news, whether it's here or on your phone or however you're getting it, you're going to get this news. And so I think him answering the questions is very good. He did say he's willing to negotiate on tariffs. I think that there's already starting to happen. I just read that Argentina has called and said maybe we'll be the first zero tariff country. So maybe that is happening, and I think that all of us can hope that. I mentioned before, I do think that the permanent tax cut situation is very important. The Senate is going to vote on that this weekend, and they need the president's push, and he's already putting his shoulder behind it. Is that what you say in sports? But I would also add this, that one thing that's frustrating is that Democrats, all of a sudden, they say they're concerned about the farmers. But for the last 4 years under Biden, they approved everything that they wanted to do against farmers. All of the regulations, all of the fuel costs, soil and fertilizer regulations, the waters of the United States, the Clean Air Act. They spent nearly $2 trillion in economic burdens on climate change, which really directly affected farmers. I'm concerned about the farmers, too, but I was concerned about them then. All of a sudden, they're concerned about the farmers. I don't think that's a constituency that they can get back, saying that they're upset about tariffs. In the first Trump administration, there was a $23 billion of federal taxpayer money had to go to farmers because of tariff policy that took away their markets for the time. Now, I asked the SBA administrator, could that happen for small businesses as well? Of course, they don't want to have to do that. Maybe it all works out in the end. But for Democrats all of a sudden to say that they are concerned about the farmers is a lot to swallow.
So Jesse Trump has 401k. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
The Trump organization has a very generous benefits package.
Yes. How would you know that?
It's a great company, Greg. Some would say it's the best company around. So he basically said every country in the world is called.
Yeah.
And this is what this is all about. So why do they have full access to our market and we have limited access to their markets? What are we getting out of that? So we have to make sure we get a good return on that. Luckily, energy prices are going down. And this shouldn't affect food prices because we only import 15% of our food. We're very self-sufficient in food. So core inflation, food and energy, should not go up because of these tariffs. And his argument is he's not creating a recession. He's saving the country from a recession because of this incredible amount of job loss, incredible amount of manufacturing loss over the year. And then Biden driving up rates, driving up debt. The country had to be saved from going over a cliff. And this is one of the silver bullets. The other one is tax and regulation relief that can't come soon enough.
Harold, did you hear anything just now that made you feel good or tingle?
I'll start with the positive. I heard him say that he's willing to negotiate with other countries. That was a different song they sang yesterday, and even some of his advisors today, so that's a positive. Hopefully the market will take that. Second, I still can't quite for the life of me understand how today was a success. The president says the tariff operation is over. I hope that is indeed the case because we lost $3 trillion of value in our own market. It's different when you say, but hold on, it's different when you say we punished the rest of them and we're now going to negotiate with them because we want to save them. We punished ourselves in the process. 3, what jobs are we actually trying to get back from these nations? You look at the manufacturing supply chains there. Many of those jobs are lower paying jobs. That doesn't mean we don't want them here, but I would imagine instead of fighting down or looking backwards, we should be fighting to create jobs to help us build and repair the next generation of robots, defense munitions and defense equipment, the next generation of pharmaceuticals. 3, you talked a lot on this show, Greg, and I agree with you. And Bert Brown tell about too fast moving towards an energy economy that is too green. Democrats want to do it, green economy right away and forget oil. You can't do the tariff thing the president's doing and this kind of abrupt jolt to our economy and not realize that you're going to impact people and prices negatively. Coffee prices and food prices did go up today, Jesse. We saw on our network, we were interviewing people across the country who were paying more for goods in different places. Finally, as I said, I'm rooting for the president on this, but I will remind everyone, there were only a handful of countries today who were not affected by these tariffs, and one of them was Russia.
And the only country that I'm worried about is the United States. And I really am not concerned about the other countries. The president has always been willing to negotiate. That's who he is. It's not like these tariffs were set in stone. We knew from the get-go that this was about a negotiation. That's number one. Number two, the monies in the stock market are going to come back.
Always
Okay.
does.
Now, they always come back. Okay. And, you know, for all those people having a panic attack, don't look for the next few weeks. Number three, when the president started talking about pharmaceuticals and tariffs, it meant just what I was talking about on the first round, that we've got to recognize that we have to manufacture that stuff here. And finally, I think one of the interesting things that's happening is that the American manufacturers, General Motors, is now hiring more employees to make more trucks. They're now improving overtime. This is just within the last few hours. And Ford is now telling Americans, you want to buy a vehicle? We'll give all of you our employee prices. Everybody is a part of this. Everybody's going to make this happen. Just wait.
Right, we're being told that J.D. Vance is in position. He's ready to be interviewed by our Lawrence Jones. Lawrence?
Hey, Lawrence.
All right, thanks, family. Let's bring in the Vice President Vice President J.D. Vance. Thanks so much for joining Fox and Friends this morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So the last time we had a one-on-one was in your house. So you weren't Vice President.
That's right.
You were auditioning. You were the only candidate that said if you didn't get selected, you would be disappointed. Well, you got accepted. So congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Let's talk about some of the issues that matter to the American people.
Sure.
And it's the president's new tariff policy. And when I think about what he got elected on is to bring the cost down for people, but also bring manufacturing back to the country.
That's right.
These are gonna kind of hit each other, right? Explain to us how you get manufacturing here, but also get the cost down for the American people.
Well, if you go back a little bit, Lawrence, remember during the first Trump administration, everybody said that Trump's tariffs were going to be inflationary back then. What actually happened? We had 1.5% inflation. We had the fastest growing economy in a generation, and we had the beginning of a manufacturing renaissance in the United States of America. Then, of course, we had 4 terrible years of the Biden administration. But I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on 2 principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America. For 40 years, we have gone down that pathway. We've seen closing factories. We've seen rising inflation. We've seen the cost of housing so high that most Americans can't afford to buy a home right now. President Trump is taking this economy in a different direction. He ran on that, he promised it, and now he's delivering. And yes, this is a big change. I'm not going to shy away from it, but we needed a big change, Lawrence. We cannot keep going down the Joe Biden globalist pathway where we have $2 trillion of peacetime debt and deficits. We have manufacturing disappearing. That is not working for Americans. We've got to take this country in a different direction.
Mr. Vice President, there does seem to be a disconnect. You see Wall Street in the media and the markets, and they're freaking out right now.
Yep.
But then I look at those workers that were in the Rose Garden yesterday, and they're celebrating. I think about all the diners that I've done across the country, and all these businesses saying, we've lost manufacturing here, and they're celebrating the move. What is the disconnect between the market and the people, those workers that are cheering this on right now?
Well, I think on one hand, frankly, a lot of people have gotten rich from American jobs moving overseas, but American workers have not gotten rich. And frankly, American companies have not gotten wealthy from the increasing growth of foreign competitors manufacturing overseas. As the president says, Lawrence, these foreign companies, they charge us ridiculous tariffs. They engage in a lot of non-tariff practices like currency manipulation. That has been awful for Main Street in the United States of America. It's meant those diners, their customers, don't have jobs anymore. Mm-hmm. It meant those great steel mills, those great auto plants have closed down and their workers have been laid off. What I saw yesterday in the Rose Garden was incredible enthusiasm because a lot of those workers, they've been working hard for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Young and old were in the Rose Garden yesterday. They've never had a president who stood up for their jobs and and stood up for American prosperity. They finally see something has shifted. There were Democrats out there, Republicans. There were union and non-union workers alike. They know this is a big change, but we need a big change in this country because what we've done, what we did under the Biden administration, it just wasn't working.
So, Mr. Vice President, I know a lot of MAGA folks, a lot of Americans that are cheering the president on, especially when he takes it to other countries.
Sure.
They feel like we've been screwed for a long time.
Yep.
But I also know people that come from our background, they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Of course.
And they want to do the patriotic duty of taking it to these other countries, but it's going to hit them a little bit. They feel. What can you tell the American people that they just can't afford an extra $3 here and there about the government making up the difference from that? Will costs go up at some point? Will this just be temporary? Are we talking 3 months or 6 months?
Well, we certainly hear, and I appreciate, how I grew up.
I know.
I grew up in a family that often did live paycheck to paycheck, and we know a lot of Americans are worried. So we are fighting very hard to bring prices down. We're going to have the biggest deregulation in the history of this country. We're doing a lot of things and already have done a lot of things to lower the cost of energy. You heard the president mention this yesterday. Eggs, when we came in, were at a 10-year high, and all of a sudden they've dropped 60% just in the 2 months of the Trump administration. What I'd ask folks to appreciate here is that we are not going to fix things overnight.
Yeah.
Joe Biden left us, this is not an exaggeration, Lawrence, with the largest peacetime debt and deficit in the history of the United States of America, with sky-high interest rates. You don't fix that stuff overnight. We know people are struggling. We're fighting as quickly as we can to fix what was left to us, but it's not going to happen immediately. But we really do believe that if we pursue the right deregulation, we pursue those energy cost-reducing policies, yes, people are going to see it in their pocketbook. They're also going to benefit from the fact that foreign countries can't take advantage of us anymore. That means their jobs are going to be more secure.
I don't think you can talk about this, the tariffs, and not talk about the tax cuts as well that we're expecting. Is this to offset some of the cuts that we plan on expecting? Will this be a permanent measure, or are we thinking when it comes to the scoring of this bill, we're going to be able to get cuts as a result of this?
I wouldn't think of tax cuts as a way to offset the tariffs. Here's the way that I think about it is, again, for 40 years, we've had an economy that rewards people who ship American jobs overseas and raises taxes on American workers, and we're flipping that on its head. We're going to cut taxes for American workers and for American companies that build here. We're going to make it harder to ship American jobs overseas. It's a total shift in the way that we've done economic policy in the United States of America, but it was necessary. So, yeah, we're going to cut your taxes. You're going to have more money in your pocket, and that's, of course, going to help you deal with the cost of inflation, but that's not about offsetting the tariffs. They work together. We want to penalize people for shipping our jobs overseas. We want to reward hardworking Americans. It's all part of the same policy.
I want to get to some other news because there were some reports that came out that Elon Musk is leaving. Now, of course, the president had already said he was only going to be here for a temporary basis.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Doge will continue after Elon Musk. Will he still be an advisor to you and the president? I know y'all have a great relationship. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, that report I saw was total fake news. Yeah. Elon came in and we said, we need you to make government more efficient. We need you to shrink the incredible, vast bureaucracy that thwarts the will of the American people, but also costs way too much money. And we said that's going to take about 6 months. And that's what Elon signed up for. But of course, he's going to continue to be an advisor. And by the way, the work of Doge is not even close to done. The work of Elon is not even close to done. You look at all of the fraudulent grants that they found. You look at people who are 150 years old, who are fraudulently collecting Social Security payments. You see our Social Security system, 40% of the people who are calling in are actually committing fraud. That means the 60% who need their Social Security checks are waiting in line. Doge has got a lot of work to do. And yeah, that work's going to continue after Elon leaves, but fundamentally, Elon is going to remain a friend and an advisor of both me and the president, and he's done a lot of good things. People don't realize how vast and uncontrolled the bureaucracy was. We've started to chip away at it, but there's a lot of work to do. It's not going to happen all in 6 months. It's going to take a long and committed effort.
Tell us about the news when it comes to TikTok. It looks like the president is going to announce maybe today some proposal. Maybe America owns 50% of TikTok. A private investor will own the other part. Is that going to happen today?
So I don't want to get ahead of any presidential announcements here, but what I've said is we've been working very hard, me and the president, the entire team, to really accomplish two things. First of all, you want to make sure that the TikTok app in the United States is not spying on people.
Right.
That's good for national security. You also want to give people access to this incredible platform, which, as we know, that's where a lot of young people get their news. That's where a lot of young people found out about the policies of the Trump administration. And we got to accomplish both of those things. I think that we're in a good place. We're going to keep on working at it, but I'll let the president make that announcement.
If it doesn't come out before the deadline, because I know the president extended.
It'll come out before the deadline.
Will come out
we got a couple days to continue working on it, to finalize some things. And of course, we're going to let the president announce whatever we ultimately decide.
Let's talk about some of the lawfare in this country, because I think it's important.
Of course.
We're seeing judges block illegal immigrants that came into the country illegally. That was the first crime. And then the second crime, they victimized American citizens, murder, rapists, and all that. What's going to be done about this? We're seeing these one-off stories of, you know, this person was a great father, and then they're hanging around with MS-13. So what's going to be done? The courts are blocking this right now, the executive branch. What are you guys going to do about it?
Well, look, we're going to keep on appealing. We're going to keep on fighting back here. First of all, we have to remember the most important thing was to stop the bleeding, to stop the influx of massive illegal immigration into the country. And in 2 months, the president has already done that. You have illegal border crossings down over 95% in pretty much every part of the American southern border. Then, yeah, we got to get the violent criminals out of here, and we've got to get illegal immigrants who came in during the Biden administration out of our country. That's what we're working on now. You're right. The courts, some radical left judges have stepped in and said you're not allowed to deport MS-13 gang members. That's crazy. We think the Supreme Court's going to overrule it, and we're going to keep on fighting for the president's prerogative to enforce the law. Lord, you have to remember the number of people who came in here, the innocent American, you know, girls like Jocelyn Nungray who lost their lives. Democrats never wept for them. Democrats never issued a congressional resolution of condemnation for their murder. Democrats didn't do anything to make it harder for violent thugs to come into our country and prey on innocent young women. What they're getting fired up about, what they're most angry about, is not that Jocelyn Nungray was murdered, but that the person who murdered her is getting shipped back home where they belong, not in the United States of America. I think it shows a disgraceful set of priorities from congressional Democrats. We're not going to let that stand in our way. We're going to keep on doing the American people's work.
Mr. Vice President, can I get you to put your lawyer hat on for a second? Because they're pointing to one of these cases of a gentleman that they said should not have been deported from El Salvador. They said he was not connected to MS-13. What would you tell them about that case? Because they're saying that this is a person that was a great member of society. You've looked at the court records. You've talked to the men and women on the ground. What can you tell us about that situation?
Well, there have been a few cases out there where the Democrats and the media say, oh, this person was just an innocent father of three, and then you find out, for example, I think this is the case that you're talking about. Back in 2019, an immigration judge looked at all the evidence, looked at all the data, and concluded that this allegedly innocent person that we sent to El Salvador was actually a member of an MS-13 gang. He had also committed some traffic violations. He had not shown up for some court dates. This is not exactly Father of the Year here. This is a person that we don't think should be in our country. Here's the most important point, though, Lawrence, is whatever the argument is, whatever the justification is, no one doubts, not even the crazy left-wing media criticized the idea that we could deport this person. They just took issue with the reasoning for why we deported this person. This was unquestionably an illegal alien. This was unquestionably a person who broke the laws to get into our country. This is unquestionably a person an immigration judge had found had zero right to be in the United States of America. We do not ask permission from far-left Democrats before we deport illegal immigrants. We do the American people's business. And again, for the American people who are watching, this is such a weird, mistaken placement of priorities. We need to make our country stronger. We need to create jobs. We need to make our streets safer. What is it about congressional Democrats that get more angry at deporting violent gang members than they do at the victims of those violent gang members? I don't even understand where they're coming from. They've gone off the deep end, and they got to come back to reality.
I think it goes to the larger point, though, about the lawfare happening right now. It's not just the immigration cases, but pretty much everything that the executive is doing right now has been challenged in these lower courts.
Sure.
Is there a way to expedite this straight to the Supreme Court? Or do we legally have to let lower courts, you know, make these decisions?
Yeah.
It goes to the appeal courts, and finally it goes to the Supreme Court. People are saying the 4 years will be up by then.
Well, there are a lot of things that we can do, not just appeals. We can limit the jurisdiction of certain courts. Even when certain courts make a ruling, say that you're not allowed to deport a person for a certain reason, we can still deport that person for another reason. So it's not like deportations have stopped. But yes, the radical courts are a problem. But our view here is we knew we were going to have this fight. We were prepared for it. We're going to litigate it all the way to the Supreme Court. We think that we're going to win. And when we do win, that will end this question permanently. Think about this. The Democrats, they're spending so many resources fighting the deportation of gang members. You have to ask, where are their priorities? But we knew they were going to do this. We're prepared for it, Lawrence, and we're going to fight all the way to the top of the courts.
Mr. Vice President, I think about your life story. Very similar to mine as well, growing up with nothing, and now you're the Vice President of the United States.
It's a great country, man.
It is a great country. We're almost to the 100-day mark.
Yep.
We know the president has been strong on the border. We've seen almost operational control of the border at this point. We've seen the waste, fraud, and abuse being brought to light. How do you think, how would you rate this first 100 days?
Man, I think the president has done more in 100 days than almost any administration has done in 8 years. And I really think that when you consider the southern border, which was the biggest crisis that we got elected to solve, 2 months in, border crossings are almost at zero when it comes to illegal border crossings. When I think just about where I grew up, the factory closures, the fact that, friends of mine were getting their parents laid off. I talked to a lot of people who couldn't afford a home on the campaign trail. I talked to women who were worried about the price of a dozen eggs. We're making steady progress on all those issues. Yes, it doesn't happen overnight, but when you look at the hundreds of billions of dollars in new investment coming into our country, auto plants that were planned to close that are now adding shifts as opposed to closing, egg prices that are way down, gasoline prices that are way down. We're making a lot of progress, but there's still a lot left to do. And I know the president is laser focused on it, so am I.
You have become almost the fighter in chief. The president sends out a message and he puts it in bullet points for the American people. And then you go on the Sunday shows and you duke it out with them. Sometimes you duke it out with world leaders in the Oval Office as well. And there's a lot of people saying about the mantle of MAGA, what happens after these 4 years. I guess this is my final question to you. Do you run for president after this? Do I know you're gonna tell me you're gonna focus on being vice president right now, but people are wondering if we can accomplish all of this in 4 years, and they want some security in that. Is JD the man to continue the MAGA agenda?
Well, look, man, I really am just not focused on politics. I'm not focused on the midterm elections in 2026, much less the presidential election in 2028. When we get to that point, I'll talk to the president. We'll figure out what we want to do. But the way that I think about it is if we do a good job, the politics take care of themselves. I just want America to be wealthy again. I want our communities to be safe again. I want us to be opening factories rather than closing down factories. I want people of my generation to be able to afford a home to raise a family in. And I want to stop all the ridiculous wars that were started by the previous administrations. There's so much to do, man. And I don't really think that much about what happens in 3.5 years. If I do a good job, if the president does a good job for the American people, and I know that we will, the politics will take care of itself. Let's just do a good job.
Well, when you do decide, you got to make me a promise. And it's going to be on Fox and Friends. It has to be. Mr. Vice President,
man. Thank
you so much. We appreciate it. All right, family, just wrapped up with the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. I'll send it to you guys.
Good job, Lawrence.
Great.
Thank you.
Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, sir, good morning to you. You have said that we don't know the consequences short term, and the long term, you think President Trump is right. You think long term we're dead financially. Here is the other side of all this from Democrats. Roll it.
These tariffs are dumb. They are also cruel, and they are stupid.
What is this going to do to American families? It's going to clobber them. And why is he doing it? To reduce taxes on the billionaires.
What we're seeing with Trump is not America first, but what's going to be is America alone.
Hey, Senator, we size it up for you. What do you think? What's the future hold?
Here's what I think. America is rich. We buy a lot of stuff. President Trump is saying that if you American business or you foreign businesses want to sell in America, then move your business here and hire American workers. That's a laudable goal, and I support it. It'll work long term. But as you mentioned, in the long term, we're dead. Short term matters. And the truth is, nobody knows what the impact of these tariffs are going to be, Bill. I listened to my friend on another network, Willie Geist, this morning, predict raging inflation. Now, I know Mr. Geist is smart and well-educated because he went to Vanderbilt, but that's just a wag. That's a wild-ass guess. China has huge trade barriers. They don't have inflation. They've got deflation. India has a lot of trade barriers. They don't have raging inflation. We'll know more in the next couple of months. If you want a surefire investment, go book as many rooms as you can at the Hay Adams Hotel across from the White House, because every foreign trade representative is going to be coming to America to meet with the Trump administration to try to negotiate. So it'll be 3 or 4 months before we know what the final tariffs are going to be. Last point, we're in uncharted waters. Tariffs are more art, in my opinion, than science. Tariffs are like whiskey. A little whiskey under the right circumstances can be refreshing. Too much whiskey under the wrong circumstances, and you end up drunk as a goat. We just don't know right now, but we'll know within the next 6 months. If it works, let's take a dozen. If it doesn't work, the president's going to have to recalibrate.
The other thing that's happening is you've got big decisions to make on Capitol Hill about the future of taxes in America, the spending plan, and that is going to go forward. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was on that yesterday.
I would assume that this will not be in place in a month, 2 months, definitely not in the back half of the year. So I'm in the camp that this is the beginning of a big negotiation.
That actually was Carlos Gutierrez, a former secretary, saying something similar to you. What I wanted to play was this. This is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, on GOP unity and tax cuts.
I've been spending a substantial portion of my time up on the Hill with the House leaders, with the Senate leaders, and one of the most underreported stories in D.C. that I think is the remarkable unity that President Trump has gotten between the House and the Senate. We are moving ahead at a very brisk pace on this tax bill. I would expect the Senate to vote on it, possibly on their portion of the reconciliation instructions, maybe even this weekend.
So, do you think that that's possible? And would that give the market some measure of stability, thinking that that could actually go through and be solid?
Number one, Secretary Bessent is very capable. I'm glad he's running Treasury. Number two, we will vote on the resolution this weekend in the Senate. It will pass. Number three, the main economic issue in America was, is, and remains high prices. The only way to get those high prices down is to cut spending, which puts less stimulus into the economy. It's to get rid of a lot of these rules and regulations to lower the prices of goods and services. And it's to pass a reconciliation bill, redesign a tax code that looks like somebody designed it on purpose in a way that it will stimulate growth and wages. That's what we need to be concentrating on, and that's what we're doing in the Senate.
So here's what the president said about that. The Senate plan has my complete and total support. Likewise, the House is working along the same lines. Every Republican House and Senate must unify. We need to pass it immediately. And now we know the Republicans in the House are up to 220 after this week's special election. Senator, thank you for your time. We'll keep an eye out for the wags along the trail. Thank you, sir. John Kennedy.
Remember what I said about whiskey, too, Hemmer.
I got it. And goats.
Good
Thank
advice.
You. See you soon.
President Trump says he's going to make America wealthy again with his new tariff plan. It includes a baseline 10% tariff on all U.S. imports, as well as country-specific rates. The White House compared these side by side to what each country is charging the United States. Trump argued our nation has been getting ripped off by other nations. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance.
I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? For 40 years, we have gone down that pathway. We've seen closing factories. We've seen rising inflation. We've seen the cost of housing so high that most Americans can't afford to buy a home right now. President Trump is taking this economy in a different direction. He ran on that, he promised it, and now he's delivering.
Well, here's something that I'm watching closely today, and it isn't just today, but how long does this last? The Dow and other market indicators are being affected right now, as you can see. Retirees and those people who are about to need those 401ks that they worked so hard to build through the years are seeing this and may be very worried. So Fox Business's Charles Payne has some words about it. Watch this.
The last thing we want to focus on right now is the stock market. So there's a lot of culprits here, but we finally have woken up, and I think the American public would have been making a huge mistake to watch the stock market. In fact, the administration says, listen, if you want to see where we're going, what we like to do, particularly remember, President Trump was elected first and foremost to bring inflation down. So they want to see the dollar come down a little bit. It's been too strong, and it's going to need to come down probably to fight off some of the countermeasures. The stock market, I would not worry at all. In fact, I'd be a buyer of weakness, not a panic. Do not panic here. That's my message to America.
Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy. Peter?
Harris, there are TVs all over the West Wing. Officials here know that the stock markets are crashing right now. But they claim that because so much money has been invested in the United States recently by companies hoping to avoid the impact of tariffs, that things could start to turn around very quickly.
People are going to start building factories right now, and that means all that construction work begins now. That starts to employ Americans today. You're going to see plants being built, factories rebuilding. All shifts are going to be running hot across America now. You're going to see employment leaping starting today.
President Trump says the operation is over, the patient lived and is healing. The prognosis is that the patient will be far stronger, bigger, better, and more resilient than ever before. Make America great again. But some Democrats are struggling to see the sunny side in any of this.
I don't know from what he's liberating the American people. He ran on making America affordable again. There are millions of Americans who voted for Donald Trump believing he would actually reduce prices. He is demonstrably raising prices on virtually everything because we are part of a globally interconnected world and economy.
If President Trump is going to talk further about this and about whether or not the declines in the markets are in line with what he expected, it'll be around 2 o'clock when he walks out to Marine One for a trip to Florida and a live golf event. Harris.
All right. Peter, thank you very much for setting us up.
Director of the National Economic Council. He joins me now. Kevin, great to have you with us. Your reaction to that, thank you. Your reaction to that, market down, I think it's at its lows of the day, is down about 1,500 for what that is worth in the mix here. What are you talking about in the White House? Is there any panic about what's happening at this point? Or what is the general feeling about what people should know about this?
Sure. What people should know about this is that President Trump ran on this because he has a positive vision of a golden age of America where the jobs come back, the jobs that a formerly sensible Speaker Pelosi talked about just now. The fact is that if you go back to 2000, when China entered the World Trade Organization, everybody said, oh, it's going to be so good for everybody's welfare because prices are going to come down. We're going to get all these cheap Chinese goods. And then what happened for 2 terms of the Bush administration, 2 terms of the Obama administration, is that real incomes stagnated. Over the whole 15 years, starting in 2000, real incomes only went up by $80 over the whole time, or a little more than $5 a year. And so while everybody's telling us, oh, your standard of living is going to go up so much because of these lower prices of the Chinese goods, that it didn't happen for the typical median person. And the reason is that wages suffered so much, right? So if prices are going down and wages are going down, then you don't get real wage growth. And that happened really for 15 years after China entered the WTO. And that's what we're talking about for the average person, Martha. If you think about the people who are in the communities that were most affected, it was way, way worse than for the average person.
So let me ask you, Kevin.
And President Trump was elected to fix that, and that's what he's doing.
So I want to show this tweet by hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman, who used to support a lot of Democrats, but during the election, he has switched over, listened to what President Trump had to say, and began to side with him. He says, sometimes the best strategy in a negotiation is convincing the other side that you're crazy. Do you think that's true here? And there's been a lot of discussion. Oh, there's going to be no negotiations at Howard Lutnick. He's standing firm on all of this. And then it feels certainly like there is some negotiation going on. Is there or isn't there?
There's nothing crazy about this policy. In fact, this is a policy that was tried and was effective in the United States for 150 years. And in fact, I think the first law passed in the U.S., or one of the first laws, was a tariff. And so this is a tried and true strategy. And, I absolutely do not think there's anything crazy about it. The president did write the book, The Art of the Deal, but he's going to decide when and if there's going to be deals on this. But as we set the reciprocal tariffs and we looked at the misbehavior of foreign countries that are basically dumping their products and hurting American workers, then a lot of the policies that we looked at are things that we think they're probably not going to change. And so I think the EU, for example, is an economy that's really on the ropes, and it's on the ropes because of all the terrible things that the EU regulators and taxers are doing. And I don't think they're going to change policy much because of what we've done. And if that's true, then the tariff on EU is going to stay the same.
That's
but if they do come back and they come make a deal with the president, of course he'll listen, because what he cares about is the American worker and the welfare of the American people.
I mean, if we drop regulations, that's one of the things. This is one of the non-tariff issues that impacts the economies of all these other countries. They have other built-in costs. Right. And if we can drop regulations in this country, lower taxes, and make it easier for manufacturers to open up new shop here, that could have a very positive impact. But it's interesting, the Wall Street Journal raising this point when you look at these country-by-country tariffs and asking if we want to discourage other countries to produce outside of China, and that's the United States, of course, but also places like Vietnam. Why does Vietnam have a 46% tariff and Israel has a 17% tariff? Can you explain, Kevin?
Right. Well, the issue that came out, right, is that the president judged that it's a national emergency, that our trade deficit is making it so that we're dependent on so much thing that we can't produce at home, like antibiotics and so on. And so what happened was that the U.S. trade representative looked at where the trade deficits were and adjusted the tariffs in order to respond to the national emergency that I think we all agree about. And so I think that the fact is that a lot of goods are transshipped through other Asian economies from China, and that the tariffs on China were, I guess, offset somewhat by pushing the trade around to other countries that didn't really pay attention to where the stuff was coming from. And so those transshippers are probably regretting the fact that they made the deal with China to do that. And, I think right now the tariff that they're facing is an appropriate response to what they were doing to destroy American jobs.
I got to ask you a question, because you brought it up in a little bit in your answer there with pharmaceuticals, because we heard during COVID how much was produced in China. And do you have any concern that China is going to cut off supplies to our pharmaceuticals as a backlash to this?
I think that, of course, they wouldn't, I believe anyone believes that they would be foolish enough to do that. There are lots of other places to get pharmaceuticals. The problem is there aren't a lot of pharmaceutical plants here in the U.S., and that's why we have this policy to fix that. And so, no, I don't think people need to be worried about that, and I don't think that they would do that.
Real quick, if you can, people look at this and say, great, we'd love to see more manufacturing in the United States. Give them a time frame. How long is it going to take? Because I've seen factories that take 5 years to get up and running. How quickly can that happen?
Well, it's already happening. If you look at the real-time data from last month or the month before or 2 months ago, then you can start to see that people are beginning to get ready. Like there were a whole bunch of jobs, auto jobs created in the last jobs report. And so the fact is that people are starting to onshore production here in the U.S., and it's very visible in the hard data. What's not so visible is what's going on in the survey data. So there's a lot of survey things coming out saying people are anxious about the change, and that's a normal response to change. But the hard data that we've been looking at was positive.
Okay. We need to give this a few weeks and maybe a few months to really watch this shake out. The market obviously having a big reaction today, but I noticed it keeps sort of bouncing off around the same point and pulling back a little bit higher. So we'll see if that's the bottom for today. Kevin, thank you. Always great to have you with us. Kevin Hassett joining us here on The Story.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.